And we are now live.
I gotta got it off my screen. This is Senate Appropriations, and we're continuing our work on the FY 2023 budget. And we have the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board section of the budget that we're taking up this afternoon. We have just passed the budget adjustment, which did include funding of $55 million to go to VHCB. And it does include the general funds, as you may have heard, why we did it that way and not just use ARPA funds. So I think that is at least that part of our budgeting session is done, which feels good to have it before we leave on for town meeting. So thank you very much, Gus. And folks, I see you've got a number of people here with you today. If you want to introduce them, many familiar faces. Senator Starr's cat's not very happy. I think he's pulling him by the tail.
It certainly sounds it, but I'll guarantee you I'm not.
Okay, so Gus, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can introduce the people here. And I don't know if you want screen sharing or how you want to proceed. As you well know, this committee is not going to get down into, maybe the detail that the House might, but we want to obviously get an update. You've had a lot of money come your way. There's, I'm sure, more work ahead, but it's very helpful to get an update and to hear sort of the challenges as well as what you've been able to accomplish in the last year. Certainly housing is been a topic and high priority as people have gone around the state. And so your role in getting housing brought online is really critical. So welcome, and it's all yours, Gus.
Madam Chair, thank you. For the record, I'm Gus Selig, Director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. With me today are a number of our members of our management team. Larry Myers, who's been at it with me for more than 3 decades, our administrative officer, our CFO, Ann Duffy, Jen Holler, our policy director, and not a stranger to you, but just joining VHCB as our Director of Planning and Program Development as we start up a number of new programs with the resources you've provided, is Trey Martin. We are going to screen share. I've got a presentation that if I move through quickly might take 15, 16 minutes. If I take my time or you have a lot of questions, which you usually have a few, it might take a little bit longer. I know you're a little later than you hoped, so we want to keep to your schedule, and feel free to both interrupt or to prompt me to move on if we're dwelling too long on anything. Jen will drive the presentation, so if she can screen share, we'll get into it. And I just want to start by saying an incredible note of thanks to all of you for the trust and support that you've given our programs and the resources. It's overwhelming, and we know we have a huge responsibility to perform well with the resources that you've provided to us, and we appreciate that trust greatly and the work you've just done on the Budget Adjustment Act. Opening here is just to remind you of our dual goals, even in the most populous parts of Vermont. So you're looking at the Episcopal Diocese land on the left that we've now have a conservation easement on, so the public forever will have access to the great trails there, and the public will also, from the water, see the landscape in that way. Last year, we also helped the Champlain Housing Trust at AHS's request buy this building in South Burlington as an isolation facility for people with COVID. And the plan is to convert it to 20 apartments as soon as we can. Just in the last month, this facility was absolutely full with people who needed to isolate from others because of the variant. Let's move to the next slide. This is just to remind you of what our mission statement is in statute. We read this very much to focus on economic vitality along with quality of life. And it says further in the statute, to maintain for future generations the essential benefits of the Vermont countryside, which is all about compact village settlement and an open working landscape. And I was actually with Senators Sears and Campion last year, just next to that body of water you see as we opened, I think it was 24 apartments on Lake Perrin on the Shaftesbury North Bennington line, which took the cooperation of 3 municipalities to do the zoning to provide water from one and sewage from another. So it was a terrific opportunity to see smart growth in action, close to a great recreation resource. And there are trails there that go out to the Robert Frost House in Shaftesbury. Let's move along. This is what we did over the fiscal 21 and the first half of 22. And I won't read all the numbers to you, but I will just tell you that the housing numbers are more than double what we've done in recent years. I'd make note of the 12, almost half the farms that are involved in our conservation program involve intergenerational transfers immediately, and over the long term, that's often the purpose of somebody selling a conservation easement. And we'll talk in a moment about the Farm and Forest Viability Program and READY programs. On the right are the impacts that we have, and there are a lot of policy areas, from downtown and village revitalization to dealing with climate mitigation and water quality, that we are involved in, and very much involved in the question of what do we do for the next generation. So if we move on to the next slide. As I said, many people sell development rights in order to facilitate a transfer. These are just a few examples. I won't go into any detail. And we also sponsor, and speaks to the importance of transfer tax revenue, a 32-member AmeriCorps program that brings young people to Vermont, or employs young Vermonters often in their first jobs, along with a college stipend. We have volunteers, members of our AmeriCorps at our homeless service providers, at home ownership centers, and also doing environmental education around the state. So we're very focused on that question. Moving on to the Farm and Forest Viability Program, which is a program that, from our perspective, if there's more transfer tax dollars, we would make further investments in. We began it just about 20 years ago, and we think it provides great leverage. And this year's farmers reported very significant increases both in their gross sales and in their net income. So we think it is a program that, one way or another, pays for itself. It provides one-on-one deep business planning and technical assistance for farmers, a lot of strategic planning, and I think helps position them better in a very difficult economy. And this year, in addition to the usual business planning, we worked with 550 different farmers in response to the epidemic so that they could access federal relief funding. Let's move on to the next slide. We've talked with you, and you made it part of our regular budget as opposed to one-time funding, about the Rural Economic Development Initiative. This is grant writing for small communities and businesses in those communities. And you can see that up to now, it's been enormously successful. Our investment has yielded $6.9 million in grants to the communities affected. We generally work in 10 to 15 communities a year. About 2/3 of the applicants have success. We'd love to double that program and have somebody work on this full time because it's been so successful. This year, we pulled in 8 different value-added producer grants, and Paul Lissay at Sweet Rowan Farm was one of the people who got one of those grants. Let's move on to the next slide. A few other examples, and there you see your colleague, Senator Starr, on a new bridge in Newport. And the story of that goes to the chair's work with Chair Flory a few years back. We provided capital bill funding to help build the bridge, but the READY program helped the proponents of the bridge project secure more than $600,000 in additional grants to get the bridge built. And the importance of this to the Newport area is it's going to connect downtown to Prouty Beach to the Bluffside Farm, and then the BB Rail Trail, which goes to Canada and beyond as a bicycling and pedestrian path. So I think the community
Did
is
you
viewing it
point
as
to who Senator Starr is? I'm not sure which one it is.
is my arrow showing up there?
Oh, I don't know. I'm just not clear whether he's in blue or yellow or.
He's not in yellow. I don't think. I think that's.
You'd better have your glasses fixed, Senator Sears.
We've also recently been working with the folks in Danville who want to turn the train station from a recycling center into a visitor center and bring people off the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail into their community. And this co-working space in Linden is another project that received help from the grant writing program. So it's something that we think has been working well, and we'd love to put more resources to it. Let's move along. In our annual report, you'll see a focus on downtown St. Johnsbury, but we could have done this in any corner of the state. We've talked with the committee in the past about the importance of the building that's been restored as both housing and commercial space in the middle of downtown St. Johnsbury. But we've also worked with the Fairbanks in providing the local match or the state match for a big federal grant as they do a major renovation and expansion. This year, the community came to us wanting to buy 117 acres, which is a great walking, hiking, picnicking area called Observatory Knob. And then in contrast to what you've just seen in Winooski, where there's 24 families about to lose their housing, a local owner of the Bright Look Apartments, which I think was the old hospital,
Yes.
went to Rural Edge and said,
I was born there, Gus.
Okay, well, then you know it well. But what the fellow did, as opposed to a fellow in Winooski who's displacing 24 families, is he said to Rural Edge, I know I can sell this, but if I do on the market, the rents are going to go up $200 to $400 a month, and a lot of my elderly tenants won't be able to stay. Can we work out a deal? And Rural Edge came to us, and we did work out a deal, and the building transferred a few months ago. And I think this is the focus of our work recently has been to add housing, but I think in this current economic environment where real estate is worth so much more, we're going to have to also focus resources on preserving existing housing and not having people lose their homes. Let's move along. Was there a question?
No, I don't see any hands.
Okay.
We love photographs, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things Vermont and California are doing as leaders in the country is converting hotels to housing. We're doing this because it's faster and less expensive than new construction. We're doing a lot of new construction as well. The building bottom left is tripling the capacity of the organization that supports survivors of domestic violence in Chittenden County to 21 apartments. We talked with you last year about the possibility of a large conversion in Chittenden County, and that just took place a few weeks ago with the acquisition of that property in Williston, which is currently housing new Americans from Afghanistan, refugees, but will be converted this summer and fall to 72 apartments as those folks help get relocated to other places. So that's been a big success, and again, thank you for that. Let's move along, Jen. Taking a page from the success of Kingdom Trails, the folks in West Windsor, after Ascutney closed and the lodge burned, came to us some years ago because the Brownsville store had closed and property values had dropped. And they said, we'd like to buy the land, add it to our town forest, and really get mountain biking and other activities going as a way to really revitalize our community. 3 weeks ago, the New York Times ran a story, and you can see the title, A Town That Saved a Mountain and a Mountain That Saved a Town. The store is reopened, the center of the town is reinvigorated, and there's lots of community and visitor use of the trail system here. I think they've installed a rope tow, so it's been a great success and just speaks again to conservation as economic development. Let's move along. 2 years ago, you gave us a significant amount of coronavirus relief funds to both add housing and to add shelter capacity. The shelter in Brattleboro took us up on that, and you can see that pictured there. In Bradford and several other locations around the state, we've added modular homes to mobile home parks, and we did a turnkey development with a developer in Stowe that's adding 13 new apartments there. In terms of the coronavirus relief funding, which had a 9-month period of time to get the work done, I'm proud to say not only did we help a dozen shelters and create 247 apartments, but we only returned $89 to the state despite that tight timeline. So we think we got our work done there. We're grateful, though, to have more time. A lot of people have begun to think we are only housing the homeless. And I just want to say that we address the whole continuum of housing need. Right now, under construction on land provided by the city of Winooski is the building in the upper right. There'll be 20 condominiums. The Champlain Housing Trust says they won't open until the fall. They've already got 50 applicants. I think the first 8 homeowners have been selected. And some years ago, after a 10-year permit fight, we did rental housing in Woodstock. There's now a 4-unit condominium under construction there. On the left is a mom and her son, and her mother also have become purchasers of a Habitat for Humanity home in Manchester. And that Habitat chapter actually bought what is about a 20-unit subdivision that they've been developing over a number of years. I think this is their 14th or 15th home that they've built there. And across the state, we've built about over 150 homes with the various Habitat chapters. Let's move along. We're asked regularly how much housing is getting built and when will it be available and how much for the homeless. So you can see here that by the end of this year, over a 3-year period, we'll have done a little over 1,100 homes, or by the end of next year, with about 45% of them serving Vermonters who've experienced homelessness. Some of that speaks to the CRF, the impact of the CRF, where the focus was exclusively on housing people who'd been homeless. The numbers for 2023 will go up as we get more applications. We expect somewhere between 15 and 20 applications to come in tomorrow for consideration at our May and June board meetings. So again, thank you for the work you just did on the Budget Adjustment Act and the work you've been doing with us. So those numbers for 2023 will go up. We're not done with what can get built in the next year. Let's move along. This shows you what's going on in the housing market all over the state in terms of the growth in the cost of entering the home ownership market. And it's up everywhere, and it's not just resort communities. We see communities like Ferrisburg or Barre where the costs are way up. So the cost of entry into the market, as well as the costs in our resort communities, are going up everywhere.
Why is Caledonia? It's higher than Chittenden.
I think in part because the cost, you probably had a lower cost to begin with. So the increase, you may not.
Smaller base.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're seeing that across the way. So Essex, it's up 31%.
And nobody lives there.
Right. But yeah, let's move along here. This is what your economist is telling you has happened in terms of the transfer tax revenue, which is an important part of our funding. And Mr. Cavett is suggesting that it'll be several years before we may see some leveling off, but we're not going to see a downturn in that revenue in the coming years. I think the only wild card there is how much will interest rates go up and how much will that have an impact on the market. But as I'm reading national news, nobody expects us to take a big backward step. And Vermont has never had as big a bubble, nor do the bubbles ever burst as big as other places. Let's move along here. This speaks to future possibilities. And again, we're seeing more and more municipalities want to get involved in housing. So Brattleboro is proposing that the upper floors of their municipal building be converted to housing. There's been discussions on and off about converting the convent to housing. There's not a deal there yet, but I hope there will be this year. An existing affordable housing project, we're looking at land there to expand the number of apartments. We've had discussions in Manchester and in Middlebury. In one case, Manchester actually owns a commercial property with a large parking lot that they want to convert to housing. And it sounds like Middlebury College might make some land available for housing. So we're looking for opportunities wherever we can get property at a very discounted rate because the cost of construction is so high right now. Let's move along. Lots of discussion about climate and what we need to do. The Climate Commission is suggesting that we need to increase the rate of conservation in order to meet both the president's goals and Vermont's goals. We've been involved in this for quite a while, but the pace would have to go up. And it's another place where we want to work more with private landowners through the Viability program on succession planning to avoid forest fragmentation. Let's move along. We are involved in this with the built environment as well. The building down below was the first multifamily building in northern New England to get passive house certification. We've been using biomass and solar and using high efficiency buildings wherever we can across the state. Let's keep going, Jen.
So on that front, clean energy standards. So what would be, we hear a lot about heat pumps. Are there other, what about, is clean energy, would propane fall into clean energy while oil and kerosene would not? I was just wondering.
My understanding is that people want to get away even from propane and natural gas ultimately.
But do they generate the same level of emissions as, say, oil?
I think they're probably not as bad, but also not as good. So biomass is considered better. And we are seeing more and more all electric buildings with the idea that the electricity would come from renewable sources. So we're seeing more heat pumps in buildings. And we are using modern wood heat as well. Again, this is Brattleboro, and we worked with the community to buy 12 acres from Sir Sosimo Lumber to restore the floodplain. Leverage federal funds. There'll be a nice riverside park. This is along the Whetstone Brook, which Representative Dean said to me was a dinky little brook, but the next slide will show you what a dinky little brook can do. And that inset picture is a public housing project downstream from Sir Sosimo's, and up to Irene, it had flooded 4 times in 10 years. So we've built 73 apartments. This most recent 18-unit building just opened in the fall in order to decommission that property, which had become just too dangerous a place for people to live. And we'll move on to the next slide. So just to move to another piece of the work we're doing, unfortunately, though it hasn't been in the headlines, opioid deaths are up in Vermont. And between these 3 properties, we'll be creating more than 50 beds as recovery residences for people who are struggling with addiction. We're getting increased federal funding to do that, but the federal funding needs state dollars as well. Let's move along to the next slide. This you've seen from me before, but it's just showing you what our transfer tax and capital bond allocations are and what the law might suggest that they ought to be. I am not here today to ask for an increase in the overall budget. As you've done with other rounds of funding, it would be helpful if transfer tax or general fund were part of the mix. If that's not possible, because you're reaching the end of that, we'll figure things out, but it would be helpful both to doing things like investing in the Viability and Ready programs, as well as doing things that may not qualify for federal funding like farm worker housing or other activities that ARPA is more difficult to utilize. Let's move on to the next slide. This is the governor's proposal for ARPA funding. I'm not sure why, because this asks us to distribute funds in consultation with the Agency of Human Services. That's the same language, but it does not speak to homelessness or housing people experiencing homelessness as a priority, as this year's legislation does. So you may want to add that. We suggested that on the House side, and it may come over with some additional words, but this is the governor's proposal. Let's move to the next slide.
So that was on top of the money that we just put in the BAA right now.
That's on top of the money, right? He asked for a total of 100 million, so you put in 55 in the BAA, and he's still seeking additional funding. So two things. One is that there's a large pipeline, and this says 18 months, but the housing pipeline is what we expect over the next 9 months. There's a significant pipeline and opportunity on the conservation side of our work. And as we showed you, one community of St Johnsbury, this is the South Hero area where we've been involved in a forest project helping some young farmers. And there's now a 30-unit elderly development being constructed as we speak. So there's plenty of work for us to do. That's always the case. This is not unusual that year. What I would say is that every time you allocate funding for housing, we get more applications than we had thought we would see. So there seems to be plenty of interest. I just noted in the newspaper the other day, the city of Barrie has set aside $1 million of its ARPA allocation to deal with housing. So there is more and more municipal interest, especially as employers struggle with finding workers, and as municipalities struggle with finding employees. I was on the phone with folks from Agrimark Cabot yesterday because Cabot, Vermont, they don't have enough employees in the plant. I think the same thing's true in their Middlebury plant, and they're thinking about, can they build housing in Cabot? Let's move to the next slide. This is our sources and uses budget, and is the kind of the best overview of our overall finances. And I guess I would just say a couple things. One is that the transfer tax doesn't just do projects. It also supports our ability to bring federal resources to Vermont. So we get matching grants for development rights from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, but they don't pay for any of the cost of the program. We need to put up $500,000 to draw in $500,000 for that AmeriCorps program I mentioned earlier. And we're the primary funder of the Farm and Forest Viability program and the READY program. So the use of state resources helps us expand what we can bring to the state. With that, I think we have maybe one more slide.
Gus, before you go back, that other slide, and it triggered a thought. Healthy and lead safety homes. I guess it's blocked by by some by some of us. One of the things that struck me is, for example, at the New Avenue, when you're going in, and this is true for it's true for a number of us, where in fact you're going in and basically rebuilding some of these buildings because they have never been insulated. They have still knob and tube. They've been cobbled together. And essentially what you're doing is rebuilding from the historic shell inward. And it's like they've been new. So do you see, for example, like Rural Edge, if they're completely rehabbing, say, the St. Johnsbury jail, and all the interior is well replaced, the windows, for example, etc. Do you see that lead reporting requirement? It just seems like some of these homes, there's really nothing. It's like they're a new house or a new apartment. And are they getting reported? Are they having to report every year simply because of the date of the building that has no accommodation for the fact that there's been recent and a very comprehensive restoration?
My guess is that the reporting requirement is for all landlords, but I don't know that, so I'll get back to you on that. And what I can say about some of these rehabs is when we use the historic tax credit that the federal government provides, which helps us bring in additional equity that's not usually there for housing projects, sometimes they require that some of the windows be kept. Sometimes I disagree with their assessment about the value of those windows, especially when they're old and really leaky. But to get the federal money, sometimes you have to do that. So in those cases, we are using the lead paint program to help pay for that part of a project. But whether people should continue to have to report when they have all new insides is a good question that I'll have to get back to you on.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
think you're
it
raising.
just seemed like and I realized like at the new avenue, they actually had to put supplemental heaters under the windows for that, historic preservation requirement.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, you had in the reconstruction, you had to deal with lead abatement, and windows may be historic, but they don't present the risk that they probably did for the last 100 years.
Yep. I'll research that question more and get back to you on the reporting requirements. I just don't know the answer myself.
Yeah. Okay.
Gus, I wonder, this is Jen Holler with VHCB. I wonder if it helps to note that the reporting goes to the Vermont Department of Health, I believe, and that our program provides the grants to the property owners, including, landlords of smaller properties, to help them address those issues.
I know you have to report to the Department of Health. I'm just saying that, in fact, when you're dealing with basically, even though the original construction, was before, I guess, 1950 or whatever the date is, essentially you're dealing with a new building. The interior's just been rebuilt entirely. And I was thinking about how to minimize reporting requirements if, in fact, there's not a risk anymore because of that work.
Why don't we move on to what I think is the last slide? And this is just us saying thank you and telling you who we are again, and a few projects. One is in downtown Rutland, and the Rutland Housing Trust there had its offices on the second floor. They're converting that to 3 more apartments and moving on as they've outgrown the space. This is a newer picture than the one we showed you when we were in a few weeks ago of the building being built in downtown Morrisville, because it's now up higher, and a farm we've worked to conserve in South Burlington that has a great burger night if you're ever in that part of the state when they're having burger nights. So with that, we can take the slideshow down and answer any questions that you have. And again, our great thanks to this entire committee for your support for our work.
You didn't have the Putnam block for Senator Sears.
No, we did not show that this year. But the next time I go to Bennington, I'd love to. I have not been in it since it reopened, and I'd love to take a tour with you, Senator.
Nice, because we can go for coffee there now. There's a great little coffee bar there that I'm looking forward to trying out very soon, and we can take you there.
Okay. All right. I missed visiting with you this winter.
Senator Campion says it's great, but I haven't, been down there yet.
Okay.
So they're doing some good things in the Putnam Mall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what a beautiful building. What a gorgeous building. Other questions? Yes, Senator Starr.
Yeah, I was wondering, on the READY program, Gus, do you get more requests to write grants than you can do at this point in time, or how's that program working?
Well, we increased the funding for it this past year, and I think we wrote a few more. And I think that with that program does 2 things. One is it helps us bring in federal dollars that we might not otherwise get, but it also helps people compete who might never have thought about competing. So if you think about a town like Bridgewater that doesn't have much of a staff, we help them with a number of grant applications. Or you know, so I think that there's plenty more demand there. Um, I think right now we're showing you a huge return on investment. I think even if it went down to 5 to 1 instead of what it is today, we'd still say it's a great success. So I guess I just think with all the federal money floating around and the possibility that there might be more, this is a good time to try to grow it a little bit.
And how much more would you need in money to, say, make that a full-time position or to push it along, give it a push?
Well, we're doing about 15 projects a year now. I'd like to have a full-time person at it and do 30. So we'd probably, and we don't do all the grant writing in-house by any means. Most of the grant writing is done out of house. So we'd probably like to add a couple $100,000 to that effort.
Yeah. So that 200,000 might bring back a couple of million, or could with 10 to 1.
If we got 10 to 1, yes, it would bring back 2 million. But I think even if 200,000 got you $1 million, we'd feel pretty good.
Yeah, be $1 million that we don't have now.
Well, and I think equally important when communities, we helped Pownell compete for a grant some years ago. They never would have even gone after it without our help. And I think just giving small communities the opportunity to compete is a good thing.
Yeah. And one more, I was wondering about the Sacred Heart property in Newport being converted. Are you any closer on having a deal with the sisters, or?
I haven't checked on that in about a month and a half. What I was told the last time I talked with somebody, was the discussions were active and they were hopeful. But I don't think there's a signed purchase and sales. I do know that this year we converted the old Catholic school in Rutland, where a lot of the local legislators told me they'd played CYO basketball, to 19 apartments. And, so I think that there's an opportunity there. But whether this is the year or not, I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right. Well, the only comment that I would have is you had a lot of people who came out in support of eliminating the notwithstanding of the transfer and fully fund BHCB. So
I should be clear, though. I'm not asking you to add that to what the governor proposed, but perhaps as part of the total. That might be, some portion might be considered, but I would not come in here and say, after all you've done, up our budget yet another 20 million beyond the governor's recommend.
Well, now we've got money. The big challenge, of course, is that we have an infusion, as Tom Cavett said, when you put 10 billion into the little Vermont economy, you're seeing a really significant impact. And we're seeing it in terms of revenues. And once that goes away and we start unwinding, the base is a puny 2% growth. So our challenge is to recognize that with the one time, we have some real opportunities, but we've got to be very vigilant about our ongoing base expenditures. Otherwise, it's going to be some real wrenching when you get into that 2% growth environment. And I will be perfectly honest. Bill takes money right off the top of what we have to work. It says my internet's unstable.
Yeah.
Is it? Is
Well,
it unstable?
We could see your lips moving, but we
Okay.
couldn't hear anything coming out.
All right. What about now?
Now it's fine.
Okay. Gosh, and I'm over at my son's house. I get to take care of his cat, keep his cat company. And so, one of the things that's really hard is to get our colleagues to understand a tax expenditure is the same as an appropriation. And so we had quite we have quite a number of ways that would be reducing revenues. And the administration proposed a package of about 50 million, and the House has passed a bill as well. And there is an impact, because if those bills, if any of those provisions, it really means we have less revenue to deal with some of these areas of chronic underfunding. And I just am using this every opportunity. It's a zero-sum game. So if you want to expand downtown tax credits, if you want to give a tax break to, you know, group XYZ, it takes revenue right out of the budget consideration, and really constrains what we're able to do, whether we're talking about the full transfer to VHCB, whether we're talking about, you know, the chronic underfunding of some of our community-based organizations that are really struggling. And so I'm just using this as an opportunity to say the full transfer. And if there was an ever opportunity to do it, it would be in this, maybe in this budgetary environment. But juxtaposed to tax expenditures that are proliferating out there, it constrains our ability to do that. So it's not that we're not appreciative or we don't value the work. Absolutely. It's just our challenge is to get to a budget that balances. So I know that there's a lot of advocacy and appreciation for your work, and certainly those of us here in the legislature have been strong supporters, and we will just simply do our best is all I'm saying.
Madam Chair, I don't think I've ever felt more appreciated than the work you and your colleagues have done over the last couple of years, and it's been incredible. You know, my job is pretty simple, which is to advocate for one program. Your job is to balance all the needs of the state. And as we talked about last fall, many of our housing partners would do really well if, for instance, our community mental health centers were better funded, because they're not getting as much support from those organizations as they seek to house a very difficult population of folks who've experienced homelessness. So I completely understand what you're saying. And as I said, my job is simple and it's not nearly balancing all the interests that you face. And I certainly understand your comment about tax expenditures. And I hope you and your colleagues in the Finance Committee will have a vigorous discussion and debate about that. And I know you'll do your best. And thank you.
Okay, other comments or questions? Well, certainly we're going to see the benefit, and these properties, the photographs really make it very visible, the impact of the work, and the housing partners, because this really takes a collective effort. So we can, and I probably do need to talk to you, Gus, you know, about that proposal on that Alpine project, whether that is.
I'd be happy to. I think our staff visited a proposed substitute for it this week that they really liked.
Oh, great, great.
But I'm happy to talk with you more about that.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously it was, I've had a subsequent conversation with folks in mental health and the value that housing of that type, I'm not necessarily saying that was what location or whatever, but that it just triggered that thought. So that's good.
Yeah, sometimes when we say no, people come back with a little better idea, and I hope that's what's going to happen. But we just had a site visit this last week with another property, so
great.
I'd be happy to talk with you more about that.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. So if there are not any further questions, I'm going to suggest we let our folks from VHCB get back to their work, and I think this is the last testimony in terms of the FY 2023 budget. Is that correct, Chrissy?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Today,
Well, we
though,
do,
right?
but we
Today.
do have a
Yeah.
bill that we want to take up next.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I've-
So, committee, last week, we took up a bill that dealt with artwork in the State House. It was bill number 173. And it's the bill that we talked about yesterday. And what we have is an amendment that has been drafted to reflect our discussion. And that was around the number of meetings and also who negotiates an MOU on behalf of the legislature. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether that draft got sent out.
I just sent it to everyone's inbox, so it should be right at the top of your email.
Okay. And was Becky Wasserman coming in? I wasn't clear on that, Chrissy.
I don't have Becky coming in. It seemed pretty straightforward, but if you think you
Yeah.
need her,
Okay.
let me know and I'll zip her a note.
All right. Well, I know everybody's so busy. So basically, it just said the committee shall meet at least one time, but the committee and any subcommittee shall not cumulatively meet more than 6 times. Doesn't say 6 times. I think we wanted to say 6 times per year, right?
Yeah.
Provided there could meet more often, but I think we need to shall not cumulatively meet more than 6 times each year.
And are they an ongoing group that will go on into eternity, or is it actually ending at some point?
I think it's an ongoing work as it relates, because the work of the State House and the acquisition of artwork and other
Yep, so it goes on,
other collections are not exactly time limited.
right?
So I think we just need to add 6 times a year, because I don't see it's there. Am
Senator
I missing
Kitchell,
it?
do you want me to put it up on the screen so everyone can take a peek at what you're looking at? I
Sure.
can amend it as you go too.
Okay, all right.
Let me
Thank
pull
you.
it up if you don't mind. Okay, can
Yeah,
everyone
good.
see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So what we have there is section D. Shall meet at least one time when the General Assembly's in session. And when I guess that was in the bill. When the General Assembly not in session, the committee shall meet at least one time.
And then, but the committee and the subcommittee shall not cumulatively meet more than 6 times.
A year.
Right. Per year, yeah. Looks good to me.
Did
I
you
don't
want to
know why
add
they,
per year?
yeah, I don't know why they need to meet at all. Or I guess it's, they're not, yeah, is it per year or is it?
Well,
I
per
do think
year,
you want to say
but
per
then-
year, because you can be in session more than once in a year. You're normally limited to a year, but when you have a special session, in theory, you could be, so.
I do think we need to say 6 times. Otherwise, it would be 6 times
Yeah.
and you're done. I think that was Alice's question,
Yeah.
maybe, as opposed to ongoing.
Right.
But I do see it's ongoing. And then they can
Well-
meet more often, but with the approval of the speaker and the president pro tem. And then so with the changes of 6 times per year, and then we go down and this is where we say the chair of the Joint Legislative Management Committee. If there's an MOU, that's where that authority would be lodged to enter into an MOU.
Yeah.
I believe those were the changes in terms of limiting the number of meetings, and the delegation of authority was of concern to this committee that would deal with the artwork and whatever, and that would be done by either the speaker or the pro tem.
But
So,
Was this a
Um,
government operations bill?
yes.
So I'll move the bill as amended.
Well,
Well-
that's nice of you because we don't have our clerk, so we have our substitute
I've,
clerk.
I've got the sheet right here ready to go.
All right, so we will vote on the amendment to add the language limiting the meetings without other to 6 each year per year. And then then any MOU would be negotiated by either the chair of the Joint Legislative Management. Alice?
Say up to, or does it just simply say 6? Does it say up to? I can't see it.
Yeah, up to would be the right.
It says it
Wait.
shall not cumulatively, both the regular and
Yeah.
the subcommittees shall not cumulatively meet more than 6 times each year.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
They could meet 3 times.
it's just it's between the regular committee and any subcommittees, they can't meet more than 6 times a year without additional approval.
Yep, good.
Or at least get paid.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the amendment by Senator Westman, seconded by Senator Starr. And just to let you know, I did alert the chair of government operations as to the amendment.
Good.
And
So
she was fine.
Senator, you ready?
Yes, so you can call the roll.
Yep. Senator Balance not here. Senator Bruce not here. Senator Nika,
Yes,
Senator Sears,
Yes,
Senator Starr,
yes,
Senator Westman, yes. Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
okay.
And then I need a motion to move the bill favorably as amended.
So moved.
Okay. And seconded by Senator Starr.
you really like this bill, don't you, Bobby?
well, yeah, I mean, I guess it's okay.
We put you on the committee.
Well, I thought maybe, I thought we talked yesterday or the day before about somebody, about that MOU and somebody approving it.
Yeah.
Did we gotten that squared away?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, we
The way
do.
it was originally written would be to have the chair of this committee on State House art collection enter the MOU, and that was a source of concern. So what the
Yeah.
amendment does is said any MOU would have to be signed by the chair of the Joint Legislative Management Committee.
Yeah.
And the chair of that committee is rotated between the speaker and the pro tem. So
Yeah.
that's where the authority to enter into any MOU would, that's what we're changing. It would be the
That's-
speaker of the
that's
pro tem.
But I think Bobby should be on the committee.
Why
He's been
would-
around long enough in the State House to understand.
But do you want to
voting.
amend the bill again to make
Senator Starr,
ex
The longest
officio
served-
or?
the longest serving member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, is an ex officio member.
Well, that
Well,
would be
that's-
you.
No,
Yeah, that-
I meant in the legislature.
You said Appropriations Committee.
No, I should have said the longest serving member in both bodies.
I
That could be
think,
Mazza.
You should just say the chair of the smallest committee room in the building.
So we have a motion which has been seconded to move the bill
Yeah.
favorably as amended. You want to
Right.
call the roll?
thank
Yep.
you.
Senator Ballant is not here. Senator Bruce is not here. Senator Nika,
yes,
Senator Sears,
Yes,
Senator Starr,
Yes,
Senator Westman, yes. Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
and the
Who's
reporter.
section of the budget?
Who-
It's
arts.
a legislature or no, or
I do the
BGS?
legislature generally.
You do?
Isn't it BG?
Yeah, I've traditionally done, but I don't do BGS, so I don't know whether it's BGS or legislature. I don't
No,
mind
it's a-
reporting it.
It's a state house. It's the state house.
Then it's
So,
legislature.
yeah, it's legislature. All right. I think your Senator Sears is the lucky reporter.
Great.
I'm exercising all the authority I have as chair.
And
I
this bill was
appreciate that.
170 what?
It was 173.
Thank you.
And then Chrissy will send you the email and you can confirm it
No, I
with
know.
Bloomer.
I can confirm. It was 502, correct, Mr.
That's correct.
Assistant
Yeah.
Clerk?
That's correct.
Deputy, are you the deputy clerk or the
Deputy,
assistant clerk?
deputy.
Deputy clerk.
I'm the shadow clerk.
So, Chrissy, I think that, is that what we had scheduled for today?
That is correct. That's what we had scheduled for today.
Okay, and
Great.
it's 3 o'clock. So I'm going to adjourn the committee then and we'll go offline.